Hey guys, it's Echo. In the last episode, I finally managed to get the Poke Center in Withered Wastelands built. I had to rescue Onyx by making it rain, which required a lot of watering the ground and random terraforming adventures, but I did it. I got it to rain. But I can't move on. Not yet. For this playthrough, I decided I'd get every area to comfort level 10 before I leave, and that means I have a lot of work ahead of me. My Pokemon are currently at comfort level 4, which meant I had 6 levels to go. And I only had 1 week to get all of it done. See, I try to get a video up every week, but I didn't want to spend 3 weeks wandering within Withered Wastelands with nothing to show for it. So I gave myself the challenge, reach level 10 in time for the next video. Hence the 1 week deadline. Day 1, I picked up my first daily stamp, a pincer, and checked out the shop for the daily items. On sale was the recipe for crisscross wooden flooring. I immediately knew that this was going to be the new road. I wasn't super happy with how the hardwood floor paths were looking. While I thought they were better than the brick, I didn't find them quite moody enough for what I really wanted. So, off I set. In order to get my comfort level up, I needed to do a few things. First off was meet more Pokemon. The more Pokemon that live in the area, the more points are available to be added to the comfort level of the area. Luckily for me, before I had even started setting up any new habitats, Wartortle had moved in, continuing my collection of the Squirtle line. Besides inviting new Pokemon in, I needed to build as many of them housing that suits their personal tastes and preferences as possible with my incredibly limited recipes. Pokemon's comfort goes up easier and faster if they live in a house surrounded by their favorite items, and they really like it if the house they live in has roads, providing them easy access to everyone else's houses in all of the central areas. Which leads to the third thing I need to do to raise the comfort level: build roads and decorate. The more Pokemon feel like they have access to things they enjoy, the happier they are, which means I get to make my space look really pretty while making their comfort level go burr. With that in mind, I, of course, started by asking my queen, Vespiquen, what they needed to be more comfortable. And they declared they would like some food. So naturally, I gave them the most abundant and neutral food I had. A Leppa berry. I then decided that it was time to replace the hardwood flooring I had placed as a road during my last episode. Placing the crisscross wooden flooring changed the atmosphere completely. And I loved it, thank God. Imagine doing that a third time. Looking at my beautiful yet barren land, I decided that there was one thing I knew I would need a plethora of. Wildflowers. It's probably my favorite type of flower in the game, as it has a pretty neutral but pleasant visual profile, so I wanted a lot of them. I called Drifloon over to the Eevee doll, flew my way to the Dream Island, and set to work picking up flowers. I also tore down the house I found with the intent on using it as a house back in Withered Wastelands. Once I had plundered to my heart's desire, ending up with over 2 stacks of wildflowers, I went home and set about rebuilding the house near the waterfall in the main area. Somehow, during this process, I miscounted, leaving me with not enough roof tiles. No matter. I left it open with the intent to fill it if I ever found more or learned the recipe for them. On my way to make some furniture, Sliggoo moved in, adding to my number of Pokemon delightfully. Once I moved Drifloon into the house and decorated a bit, I called it a day for day 1. The next day, day 2, gave me a Vulpix stamp, and I decided to work a bit more on the roads, building an inn towards the bean garden. I took the opportunity to climb over the hill and open up the passageway to a secret area that I will proceed to not do anything with for the rest of the video, but it's open now, and that makes me happy. I got right back to placing roads into the bean garden area with the intent of building some new homes in it. It's a pretty self-contained space, so I figured starting there would help keep me just a little less overwhelmed. Once the rows were finished, I gave Vespiquen a bean, because their favorite flavor is sweet and the beans are sweet for some reason, and Combee immediately ate it, so I had to put another one down. After that, I finally gave the doll back to Drifloon, accidentally creating a new habitat in their house, and then it was finally time for the first house in the bean garden area. I wanted to make the house for Drillbur, as they are naturally the keeper of the garden, so I built up a boxy little house with no windows to prevent any light from getting in. I used hardwood flooring as a cool little highlight on the walls, also because I made so many when I tried to use it as a flooring, and used hay blocks to make a flat thatched roof. I moved Drillbur in, and they declared it aggressively average, lacking in food, so I slapped a plate with a bean down, accidentally discovering another habitat, and called it good. After I had finished that house, I took a brief break to go exploring, discovering an area with a new type of berry, Chesto berries. After harvesting them all, I discovered Gulpin had moved into Drillbur's home. They promptly asked me for a carrot, which I supplied, and what do you know, the environment level went up. I'd made it to level 5. Not only that, but the new recipes in the shop included roof tiles, which meant I could finish Drifloon's house. First though, the PC gave me party poppers as a congratulations for reaching comfort level 5. Naturally, I put them in a box where I promptly forgot they existed, gave Onyx some Chesto berries to crush, and called it a day, without actually fixing the roof of the house. Coming back in for day 3, and I got paid for the week's stamps, then given a new pincer stamp. Girder moved into the old rock Timber lived in, and I promptly moved them into the house with Timber. I finally gave Hitmonchan the beans they had asked for back in episode 2. Trust me, I'm very timely with these things. Then set about tearing down the next house in Bean Alley. Once I had torn it completely down, I headed back to gather materials to build it back up and met Blastoise, which completed the Squirtle evolution line, and Slowbro, who had moved in with Drifloon. Blastoise alerted me to another new member of our community, Ivysaur. That's 3 Pokemon in quick succession to build houses for. Good. More Pokemon means I grow ever closer to my goal of Comfort Level 3. Then it was time to finally finish off Drifloon's roof so that they could be dry when it rains, like it was the whole time I was building it, but don't worry, Ditto doesn't take fall damage. Before I went to start rebuilding the house I had torn down earlier. Now, Ivysaur moving in had given me an idea. I'm going to make this into the Bulbasaur line's house so that they can sort of be the keepers of the little bean garden. This means that I need to make it a pretty big house overall so that later Venusaur can move in comfortably, and they're a pretty large Pokemon. Once I had put in the furniture, attempting to keep to their tastes with my very limited recipes, I brought Bulbasaur and Ivysaur over and moved them in. Then it was time to garden. I left a stump next to their house to work as a little seat and started planting flowers, bushes, and grass to end up with this little garden. Bulbasaur and Ivysaur helped grow it with their grow ability, and I think it looks pretty good. Day 4, I got a Mew stamp! The rare stamp! Yeah! Then I went and met Excadrill, who had moved into the bean garden Drilbur used to live in. Convenient. I promptly moved them in with their evolution line, much as I had Girder the day before. There was one space left in Bean Alley, and originally I was going to make it into a house. But as I looked at it, I thought, I don't really like where my storage is right now. It doesn't really move me forward with my comfort level rating, but what if I build a little storage space with a surrounding garden? It would open up that space where my crafting station currently is to either be removed or built into something new. I loved the idea, so I set to work. I wanted it to be sort of like a gazebo, except instead of relaxation, it would be a place for my storage. Once I had built up something that I liked, I began to set up the garden space around the gazebo, preparing the stage to have a beautiful space to look at for while I sorted my chests back out. But while I was gardening, what do you know, my comfort level raised to 6. Maybe this project matched my goal after all. I just needed to have faith that making the wastelands beautiful makes Pokemon other than this Ditto happy. Checking the terminal, I unlocked a few recipes, none of which are currently useful to me, then finally began the process of moving my storage and crafting the new area. It was a long and arduous process, but once it was done, I definitely think it was worth it. It looks much nicer than the chaos I had before. Not that I took the time to show you or anything. No, I had projects I had to complete, an environment level that needed raising. I quickly set to work laying out the path towards the beach with a tower. Then I tore down the old building there. This was going to become the Squirtle line's house, though I hadn't figured out yet how I would make it big enough to be comfortable for Blastoise. I ended up deciding on making it an L shape, in the hopes that it would be big enough. I also included the little walkway porch thing that was the original ruins to add a bit of space for some outdoor play furniture once I decorated the house. Once the house was fully built, I had laid down the furniture, I set to making Magikarp a house, using a mix of sand and fences to make the illusion that their house was in the water. I moved them in promptly, then went and found the Squirtle line to move them into their new house. Blastoise would have to wait on having a bed since I hadn't learned the recipe for a big enough bed yet, but otherwise, I could work pretty well on what their needs were. Another day meant another stamp, and day 5 gave me Moltres. Not as rare as a Mew stamp, but still very appreciated. Then it was nose to the grindstone. I placed some new furniture in the Squirtle house to hopefully improve their comfort, then found Scyther and Excadrill discussing who was the most powerful. Unusually, they asked me a question, and flattery does wonders because they seemed very pleased when I complimented them. But enough about that. I quickly set to work building a staircase up to a small raised area I had found near the waterfall by the Squirtle house. I wasn't sure how I wanted to decorate it though, and besides, it probably wasn't going to be enough of a focus on comfort compared to a house. So I set to work making a little enclosure designed to be the Slowpoke house. To be honest, I decided to keep it by the ocean mostly because I didn't want to take the time to walk with Slowpoke to a place further away. They can stay by where they spawned, I think. After placing just a few more pieces of furniture, I was pretty happy with the house. It was simple, but nice. So I moved Slowpoke and Slowbro in as quickly as their slow steps allowed, then moved up to the area above their house to make a little campfire resting spot for the Pokemon to use if they ever wanted a cozy place to pass the time. I listened in on Pinsir and Girder discussing Girder's emotional support metal beam, then went and added some wooden pathing to the base of the little fire pit area, hoping that it would attract more Pokemon to spend time up there. I don't really think that it did, unfortunately. I realized as I went to sort my inventory that I was running dangerously low on wood. Given most everything I could make required either logs or lumber, I needed more, and stat. So off I went to Drifloon's house, requesting a trip to a dream island where I cut down every tree I found. With my deforestation logs freshly acquired, I began to lay the rest of the road around the Pokemon Center. While digging, I found a shield fossil, which I promptly used to set up a little habitat with the hopes of meeting a new Pokemon to help raise my comfort level. Once the paths were done, I made a chancy resting spot in the park with the goal of adding more habitats. It's definitely one of my favorite habitats in the game. It just feels very park-like, and so I decided I'd set it up as a permanent fixture in the little park behind the Pokemon Center. Then I logged off for the day, running out of time I had available for my PlayStation. Day 6 started with Scyther complaining about how dark it was because they were standing in the shade, and me getting a Mewtwo stamp to match my Mew stamp. But even with the excitement of 2 epic matching stamps, I was beginning to get a bit worried. I had spent an entire play session trying to improve the living conditions of my Pokemon, building new rest areas, improving their homes, and even building a new house, but the environment level had not gone up. I knew that it tended to get harder and harder to improve the higher the level, but this was slower than I wanted. I only had a few days left. Thankfully, both Blossom and Shieldon had moved in, adding more Pokemon to the area and raising the points available for my comfort level to raise. But they were not the highest priority to improve the comfort of. 2 of the hardest workers in the Withered Wasteland were Scyther and Pinsir, making me lumber almost 24/7. So I decided I'd make their house, pathing up towards the hill that housed Professor Tingrel's cave, then building an enclosure with items and decorations that I thought Pinsir and Scyther would enjoy. Thankfully, they both seemed to like it well enough, so I set off to try and improve the Squirtle house. None of them ever seemed to love it that much. Blastoise wanted food, and Squirtle wanted humidity by the ocean. It's times like this where one must get creative. If Squirtle wanted humidity, I decided it was time to make them a yard so that I could grow grass and trees and make them feel like their house was humid. While I was tearing out the sand to replace it with grassy dirt, somebody found some of the food I had left out for them, and the environment level increased. Environment level 7 had arrived, but I was focused. I finished laying out the Squirtle yard before finally going and checking the terminal, completing the newly opened challenges and checking out the new recipes in the shop. I unlocked some of my favorite furniture in the game, the garden bench and chair, but I can't make them because they require iron, which I have no way of getting. Not a problem, that just means they'll be ready for a later area. Moving on, I began to lay down the roads heading towards Onyx's cave, which also worked as a little stony beach area. Once I had reached it, I began work on the Sliggoo house. I wanted it to have a little tide pool with a fountain, so I made it out of fence post, filling in around some stone and tucking it into the opening of the cave. I very luckily and accidentally made an urgent care habitat in their house using the random healing item I had found before, and then moved the 2 Pokemon into their new personalized home. By the time I had finished moving them in, Hitmonlee had arrived, adding another Pokemon to my roster. I then decided it was time to move upwards and began to place the road leading up to the broken down bridge that spanned the opening leading towards Onyx's cave. Because of its high altitude, I wanted to move Pidgey in somewhere up there, but first I wanted to repair the roads and build some new habitats while I was there. While I was repairing, Peros moved in, and I ran out of roadblocks. On my way to make more, Blossom gave me a stick that they found, which is a largely useless gift. But I guess I reacted with an appropriate amount of gratitude because that caused the environment level to go up a second time. Level 8, baby! I was rolling! And also had to leave for the day. I kept that energy going right into day 7, the second to last day. After grabbing my Tangela stamp, I set about making new habitats to get more Pokemon, since that was the main thing I changed between the days getting no comfort levels and the day before, where I got 2. I made an illuminated tall grass, a tree-shaded flower bed, a hydrated flower bed, a flower garden habitat, met a Shellos, made a grave offering habitat, and a flowery table habitat. With my plan for unlocking many Pokemon very quickly now in place, I set to work continuing the project I had begun the day before, repairing the area with the bridge. I laid more roads, repaired the bridge, then worked on roading the other side. Then I finally got to work on the project I had decided on the day before, making the Pidgeylines house. I put down some furniture and flowers, then moved Pidgey in. They were the only member of the Pidgeyline I had met so far. Then I continued fixing the roads in the upper area. I figured it was better to have it all the way done so that later, if I wanted to build up here, I wouldn't have to fuss about building the roads. With that out of the way, I moved on to even more road building. This time, I started repairing the road down by Onyx's cave towards the run-down, barely standing house. I wanted to rebuild it and move the Hitmon Pokemon in. The sort of semi-secluded but still reachable spot felt perfect for a trio Pokemon dedicated to perfecting their personal martial art. Now, I had only met 2 of them, Hitmonlee and Hitmonchan, and not Hitmontop, but I could always move them in later. With the road finished, I noticed a new Pokemon had moved in, Weepin' Bell, who promptly considered eating me, and Litwick, who offered to help find the humans since they were probably lost. The Pokédex entry quickly clarified that they wanted to do this to drain the life force from the people who followed them. Horrifying! That's okay though, Litwick. You're still my favorite. Maybe even doubly so because beating Litwick raised the comfort level to 9. With just one level to go, I was feeling very confident. While I only had 1 day left to record and had just run out of time for that recording session, I also only had to raise one more level before I would have reached my goal of ultimate power. It was the dawn of the final day, and I, once again, was filled with determination. I was given an Abra stamp, allowing for a very aesthetically pleasing stamp card, then immediately set to finishing the project I had started the day before. On my way over, I found Slowking had moved into Drifloon's house, so I moved them into the Slowpoke enclosure. They immediately started a conversation with Slowbro about a distant, vague memory of walking on all 4 legs like Slowpoke until something terrible happened. I, meanwhile, side-eyed the Shelders desperately biting one's tail and one's head. Illumies had also moved in, but I did not have a house to move them into, so after meeting them, I proceeded to ignore them. Then I got right down to it, working to repair the old house and make it livable for the Hitmons. It was pretty easy to fix up, not even needing to tear it down first, but then I got to meet Pidgeotto, who had moved into the elevated tall grass habitat I had built. Unlike Illumies, they had a house ready for them, so I moved them right in with Pidgey. Then, on my way to gather furniture, I met Parasect, who coincided surprisingly closely with me getting to eavesdrop on Paros having a conversation with Bulbasaur about growing to be very big when they grow up. A trait that will be true for one of them, and it's not Paros. With those distractions out of the way, I gathered up Hitmonchan and Hitmonlee and led them to their new home, quickly placing the furniture so that they could move in and be comfortable. Then I noticed their garden and thought, why not make it a house? The Hitmon family can have a dedicated family of gardeners they hired with their Poke money or something. While I was gathering materials, I saw Bulbasaur walking on their roof, but did not manage to get a photo, unfortunately. I don't know why they decided they wanted to be up there, but they seemed pretty content. Then I got right back to work, setting up the bones for a good enclosure that prompted Hitmonchan and Hitmonlee to come out, praise me, then challenge each other to a duel. It was confusing, but charming. But charming or not, I must focus. I had only a little further to go before I reached comfort level 10, and only 30 minutes to do it. So I placed furniture, decorated the space into a garden, and invited the Bellsprout line to live in the newly made home. Naturally, as one might expect, they hated it. Weepin' Bell wanted food, which I accidentally fed them the food meant for Bellsprout, and Bellsprout wanted humidity. So I started planting grass, first within the bounds of their habitat, then out of the bounds of their habitat, and pretty much any grass that was in the general area of their habitat to try to get the humidity to raise to their liking. They still were not happy, so I left, figuring I could raise the environment level by making another Pokemon happy. I decided the next home I would build would be for the Oddish line. While I didn't have Oddish, Gloom, or Vileplume, I did have Blossom, and I felt they deserved a nice thank you for raising my comfort level earlier. Besides that, I wanted to try to give them a house that sort of mimicked the idea of them being a family of keepers of the Withering Waste Garden. So I set to work, building and decorating a space that would hopefully be large enough to comfortably house the entire line when it came time for it. Though as Blastoise would attest to, my track record on that front was not the best. Then, when I was done and searching for Blossom to move them in, the environment level went up. I have no idea what triggered it. Maybe Bellsprout decided it was human enough after all. But I had done it. I had raised the environment to level 10 before I ever left the area. After Blossom did not show up for my honey, which only made me a little sad, I got ready to do a celebratory tour. And here it is, the final walkthrough. After all of that effort, it actually looks really nice in my opinion. The Withered Wastelands has one of my favorite aesthetics. It's very cottagecore, in my opinion, and I find it difficult to keep on the wooden color palette and not come out with something I like. It took a lot of time and effort, but in the end, I got a space that I feel is elegant, cozy, warm, inviting, and just a little bit moody, all at once. That's not to say that Withered Wastelands is done permanently. There's still a lot to do in the area, like fixing up the rest of the areas that are lifted up to a high altitude. But all of that will be done when I have finished the other 3 areas and unlocked the full spectrum of abilities and tools. It'll be cool to see the contrast between how I build when I am completely limited versus how I build when I have endless options and opportunities. But with that, thank you all so much for watching. Let me know in the comments what you think I should do for the next area, Bleak Beach. See you all next time.